Welcome back to the channel. We spend a third of our lives asleep and another third at work. But what if your workplace didn't want you to leave? Grab a drink, turn off the lights, and settle in. We are clocking in for a shift at a hotel you won't find on any map. They say desperation has a distinct smell. To me, it smelled like the interior of my 2012 Honda Civic, stale coffee, cheap upholstery cleaner, and the lingering scent of impending bankruptcy. I had $12 in my checking account, and rent was due in 3 days. That is the only reason I found myself driving up a winding, fog-drenched road in the Catskill Mountains at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. I had found the ad on a forum I don't usually visit. It wasn't Indeed or LinkedIn. It was a message board for unconventional employment. The post was simple. Night porter needed. The Grandview Hotel. $50 an hour. Immediate start. Must have no strong family ties. $50 an hour changes your perspective on red flags. I ignored the weird requirements. I ignored the fact that when I typed the Grandview Hotel into Google Maps, the pin dropped in the middle of a dense forest with no roads leading to it. I just drove until the pavement ended and the gravel began. The hotel appeared out of the mist like a cliff face. It was enormous. A monolithic slab of Art Deco architecture that looked like it had been teleported from 1925. It was dark, save for the golden glow of the lobby windows on the ground floor. No cars in the valet lot. No doorman. Just the building, sitting in the silence of the woods, breathing. I parked my car. The engine sputtered and died before I even turned the key. I grabbed my resume, which was mostly exaggerated retail experience, and stepped out. The air was cold, unnaturally cold for August. It didn't smell like pine or dirt. It smelled like ozone, like the air right before a lightning strike. I pushed through the revolving brass doors. The silence hit me first. You know how a hotel lobby usually sounds? The low hum of conversation, the clinking of luggage carts, the distant ring of a telephone. The Grandview was dead silent, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. The lobby was lavish. Crimson carpets, velvet armchairs, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than my entire life's earnings. But it was empty. Not a single soul. "Hello," I called out. My voice didn't echo. The heavy curtains and carpet swallowed the sound instantly. "Mr. Reed," a voice said. I jumped. Behind a massive mahogany reception desk, a man was standing. I hadn't seen him walk in. He was just there. He was tall, wearing a suit that fit too perfectly, and his skin had the pallor of someone who hadn't seen the sun in a decade. He wasn't smiling. "You're late," he said. His voice was smooth, like oil pouring over gravel. I'm sorry," I stammered, walking up to the desk. The GPS got a little confused near the tree-line. "I'm David." "I know who you are, David," he said. He didn't blink. I realized, after staring for a few seconds, that his eyelids hadn't moved once. "I am Mr. Sterling, the general manager. We have been waiting for you." He reached under the desk and pulled out a single sheet of paper and a heavy fountain pen. He slid them across the marble surface toward me. "The application?" I asked. "The contract," he corrected. I looked down at the paper. It wasn't a standard tax form. The font was archaic, almost like a typewriter script. I skimmed the paragraphs. Most of it was standard legal jargon about liability and non-disclosure. But then, my eyes caught a clause near the bottom. Clause 4A. The employee acknowledges that the hotel operates on non-standard time. The employee agrees not to check personal timekeeping devices while on the premises. Clause 7C. The employee forfeits the right to leave the premises before the shift concludes at 6 a.m., regardless of medical or psychological emergencies. "Is this standard?" I asked, pointing at the paper. "The part about psychological emergencies?" Mr. Sterling leaned forward. His eyes were a pale, watery blue. "The Grandview is an old building, David. It has quirks. The plumbing rattles. The wind howls. Some previous employees found the isolation difficult. We need to ensure you are committed." He paused, then asked a question that made the hair on my arm stand up. "Are you superstitious, David?" I laughed nervously. "No, I don't believe in ghosts, if that's what you mean." "Good," Sterling said. "Ghosts are the least of your worries. We deal with guests who value their privacy. They are wealthy, eccentric, and particular. Your job is simple. You sit at this desk. You watch the monitors. You answer the phone. And if a guest asks for something, you provide it. No questions." He tapped the paper. $50 an hour, David. Cash. Paid at the end of every shift. My rent was due. I looked at the dark wood of the desk. I looked at Mr. Sterling's unblinking eyes. I picked up the pen. The ink was dark red. I signed my name. The moment the pen left the paper, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The lights overhead seemed to dim by a fraction. The air grew heavier, tasting metallic. Mr. Sterling smiled for the first time. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just felt the trap snap shut. "Excellent," he whispered. "Welcome to the family, David." He reached under the desk again and produced a heavy iron keyring and a leather-bound book. He placed them on the marble. "Your keys," he said, "and the logbook." "The logbook." "The rules," Sterling said. His demeanor became serious. "Sharp. There is no training manual. There is only the logbook. Read it. Memorize it. Follow it. If you follow the rules, you will earn your money and you will leave at 6 a.m. safe and sound." "And if I don't?" I asked, half joking. Sterling didn't laugh. He checked his watch, an old analog piece that seemed to be ticking slightly too fast. "I'm leaving now, David. The staff entrance locks automatically at midnight. You are the only employee on site until dawn. Do not try to open the front doors. They are locked from the outside for your protection." "My protection? From what?" "From what is outside," he said simply. He walked toward the elevators. He moved gracefully, almost gliding. He pressed the button, and the brass doors opened with a smooth hiss. He stepped inside and turned to face me. "Read the book, David," he said as the doors began to close. "And whatever you do, do not let the fire go out in the lobby." The doors shut. I was alone. I looked around the massive, empty lobby. The silence was back, heavier than before. I looked at the fireplace across the room. It was roaring with a fire I hadn't noticed before. I looked down at the leather book on the desk. It was old. The cover was scratched. Embossed on the front were the words, "Night Shift Protocols." I opened to the first page. The leather of the book felt greasy, like it had been handled by thousands of sweaty palms before mine. I sat down in the heavy leather chair behind the desk. It squeaked, a lonely sound that seemed to travel too far in the vast, empty space. I adjusted the green-shaded banker's lamp. The light pooled on the first page. The handwriting inside was jagged, frantic. It looked like it had been written by someone in a hurry, or someone whose hands were shaking uncontrollably. To the new guy, the first line read, "If you're reading this, Sterling already left. Good luck. You're going to need it. Listen to me carefully. Forget everything you know about how a hotel works. This place isn't a hotel. It's a machine, and you are the grease that keeps the gears from grinding. Here are the rules. Do not question them. Do not try to understand the logic. Logic doesn't apply here. Just follow them." I scoffed. "Okay, drama queen," I muttered to the empty room. I kept reading. Rule 1. The shift starts at 12 a.m. and ends at 6 a.m. Do not trust the clock on the wall behind you. It lies. Trust only your own wristwatch. If you don't have one, count your heartbeats. I instinctively glanced at the large, ornate clock on the wall behind me. It read 12:05. My phone, sitting on the desk, read 12:05. They matched. "Strike one for the spooky book," I whispered. Rule 2. Never acknowledge the guests on the 7th floor. There are no guests booked on the 7th floor. The 7th floor is under renovation. If the elevator stops on 7, do not get out. Do not look into the hallway. Press the door close button until it shuts. If a woman in a red dress asks you to hold the door, apologize politely, but do not let her in. Rule 3. Between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., the phone at the front desk will ring. You must answer it before the 4th ring. If you answer, say only, "Front desk, how may I be of service?" A voice will give you a room number. Write it down. Do not go to that room. Do not send service to that room. Just write it down and burn the paper in the lobby fireplace immediately. If you miss the call, hide. Rule 4. If you see a black cat walking through the lobby, do not pet it. It is not a cat. It is a scout. If it sees you, acknowledge it. The rest of the pack will come. Rule 5. Keep the lobby fire burning. The shadows in this building are heavy. They have weight. If the fire goes out, the shadows will get heavy enough to crush you. Rule 6. Room 404 does not exist. The numbering skips from 403 to 405. If you receive a complaint from room 404, apologize for the inconvenience and hang up immediately. Do not speak to them for longer than 10 seconds. I stopped reading. There were pages of these. Rules about mirrors, rules about the basement, rules about the vending machines. It read like a bad creepypasta someone had printed out to haze the new guy. $50 an hour, I reminded myself. For $50 an hour, I'll play your little role-playing game. I leaned back in the chair and looked at the monitors. There were 16 screens, showing black and white feeds of empty hallways, the kitchen, the laundry room, and the elevators. Nothing was moving. It was dead static. I checked my phone. 12:15 a.m. I decided to test the boundaries. I stood up and walked to the front doors, the brass revolving doors I had come through just 15 minutes ago. I pushed on glass. It didn't budge. I pushed harder. Locked. I looked for a deadbolt or a latch. There was none. The doors were fused shut, as if the brass frame was a single solid piece. "Okay," I said, my voice rising a little. "Funny." I walked to the side doors. Locked. I went to the windows. They were floor-to-ceiling glass, looking out into the pitch-black woods. I pressed my face against the pane. Outside, the fog was swirling. It was thick, gray, and moving unnaturally fast like time-lapse footage. I tapped on the glass. It sounded thick, bulletproof thick, locked for my protection. I muttered, quoting Sterling. A chill ran down my spine. I turned back to the lobby. The fireplace crackled loudly, a log snapping in the heat. Keep the fire burning. Rule 5. I walked over to the fireplace. It was massive, big enough to roast a whole pig. A stack of dry wood sat in a brass bin next to it. I tossed a log onto the flames. The fire licked it up greedily, almost instantly turning the bark to ash. I went back to the desk and sat down. Ring. The sound cut through the silence like a gunshot. I jumped, nearly knocking over the lamp. It was the phone, an old, black rotary phone sitting on the corner of the desk. I looked at my watch. 12:30 a.m. Wait. Rule 3 said the phone rings between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock. This was too early. I looked at the logbook again. I scanned the pages frantically. Rule 9. If the phone rings before 1 a.m., do not answer it. It is a wrong number from somewhere else. The phone rang again. Ring. It was loud, violent. My hand hovered over the receiver. Instinct is a funny thing. When a phone rings, your brain screams at you to answer it. It's a conditioned response. Ring. Don't answer it. I whispered. I stared at the black plastic. Ring. On the 4th ring, the answering machine clicked on. There shouldn't have been an answering machine. It was a rotary phone, but a speaker on the base crackled to life. Static filled the room. White noise. Then a voice cut through. It sounded like me. Not similar to me. Identical to me. "David," the voice on the speaker said. It sounded terrified. It sounded like it was crying. "David, if you're listening to this, get out. Break the glass. Run. They lied about the pay. They lied about the time. It's not 12:30. It's been days. David, please just run. The message cut off with a wet snap, like a melon being dropped on concrete. Then silence. I sat frozen in the chair. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at the phone. It sat there, innocent and black. I looked at the clock on the wall. It didn't say 12:32 anymore. The hands were spinning. Fast. The minute hand was whirring around the dial like a fan blade. The hour hand was racing forward. 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. I looked at my wristwatch. 12:32 a.m. Rule 1. Do not trust the clock on the wall. It lies. I swallowed hard. The saliva tasted like copper. I looked at the logbook. Okay, I whispered. I'm listening. I spent the next hour staring at the clock on the wall. It had stopped spinning, but now it was running backward. The second hand ticked counterclockwise with a rhythmic, mocking thud, thud, thud. I tried to distract myself. I cleaned the desk. I organized the pens. I checked the security monitors every 30 seconds. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Around 1:45 a.m., my throat started to feel dry. The air in the lobby was parched, likely from the roaring fireplace I was dutifully feeding every 20 minutes. I remembered seeing a vending machine on the security feed for the second floor break room. I checked the logbook. Rule 12. Vending machines are located on the even-numbered floors. Only use the machine on the second floor. Do not use the machine on the fourth floor. It dispenses items that are not for human consumption. If the machine on the second floor asks for a currency you don't recognize, walk away. Okay, I muttered. Second floor. Standard quarters. Get a Coke. Come back. I grabbed my keys and headed for the elevators. I pressed the up button. The doors slid open instantly, revealing a mirrored interior. I stepped in and pressed 2. The doors closed. The elevator music was playing. It was a slow, distorted version of I Only Have Eyes for You. The strings sounded like they were being played underwater. The elevator jerked upward. Ding! The doors opened. Second floor. The hallway was dimly lit with flickering sconces. The carpet was a nauseating pattern of swirling brown and gold. I walked down the hall, following the sign for ice and vending. The machine was an old glass-fronted model, humming loudly in the silence. It was stocked with the usual: chips, candy bars, sodas. I dug into my pocket and found 2 quarters. I slotted them in. Clink, clink. I pressed the button for a Diet Coke. E4. The coil turned. The bottle fell. Thunk. I reached into the bin to grab it. The metal flap trapdoor clammed down on my wrist. Ow. I yanked my hand back, but the metal flap held tight. It wasn't a mechanical jam. The metal felt active. It was squeezing. Let go. I grunted, pulling harder. From inside the machine, the low hum changed pitch. It sounded like a growl. I looked through the glass. The coil for E5, a bag of pretzels, was moving, but wasn't turning. It was uncoiling. The metal spiral straightened out, like a snake stretching. Then it pressed against the glass from the inside, tapping. Tap, tap, tap. I panicked. I braced my foot against the machine and yanked my arm with everything I had. Ryup. My sleeve tore, and my hand flew free. I stumbled back, falling onto the hideous carpet. I scrambled to my feet, clutching my wrist. It was bruised, a perfect red ring where the machine had grabbed me. I looked at the machine. The flap was closed. The E5 coil was back in place, perfectly spiral. The hum was normal. Okay, I panted. No snacks. Got it. I turned to head back to the elevator. That's when I noticed the hallway had changed. When I walked to the vending machine, the hallway was straight, about 50 feet long, ending at the elevator bank. Now, as I looked back, the hallway was longer, much longer. It stretched out into the darkness, seemingly endless. And the doors on the sides were different. They weren't numbered 201, 202, 203 anymore. They were numbered with symbols. A triangle, a square with a line through it, a crude drawing of an eye, and the elevator doors were gone. I spun around. Behind me, the vending machine was gone too. It was just a blank wall. I was in a hallway with no beginning and no end. Calm down, I told myself. My voice was trembling. Rule, check the rules. I fumbled for the logbook in my back pocket. I realized with a jolt of terror that I had left it on the front desk downstairs. Stupid, I hissed. Stupid, stupid, stupid. I started walking. I had to find a stairwell. Every hotel has a stairwell. I walked for what felt like 10 minutes. The pattern on the carpet never changed. The flickering lights never stopped buzzing. Then I heard it. Behind me. Far down the hall. Click, clack, click, clack. The sound of high heels on a hard floor. But there was no hard floor. It was carpet. Whatever was walking was heavy enough to sound like that through the wool. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I turned around slowly. Way back in the gloom, standing under a flickering light, was a woman. She was wearing a red dress. My blood turned to ice. Rule 2. If a woman in a red dress asks you to hold the door, she wasn't asking to hold the door. She was standing still, facing away from me. Her black hair hung down her back. Then, her head snapped backward. Not turned, snapped, like her neck was a hinge. She was looking at me upside down, her chin pointing to the ceiling, her eyes wide and white. She smiled. "Room service," she called out. Her voice was too loud. It boomed down the hallway. I didn't answer. I turned and ran. I sprinted down the endless corridor. The symbols on the doors blurred past me. I, triangle, hand, I, triangle, hand. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. She was running too, and she was fast. I saw a door on my left that looked different. It was painted green. It had a glowing exit sign above it. I threw my shoulder into it. It burst open. I tumbled out onto a cold, concrete landing. The stairwell. I slammed the door shut behind me and leaned my back against it, gasping for air. Thud. Something hit the door from the other side. A heavy, solid impact. Thud. Room service. The voice cooed from behind the steel. I backed away. I looked over the railing. I was on a landing. Stairs went up. Stairs went down. But when I looked down the center gap, the spiral went on forever. Endless flights of concrete stairs descending into a black abyss. And when I looked up, it was the same. Endless stairs rising into a white void. I was trapped in the throat of the hotel. I stood on the concrete landing, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The pounding on the door had stopped. The woman in the red dress had either given up or found another way in. I looked at the stairs. Up or down? Logic said down. The lobby was on the ground floor. I had come from the second floor. 2 flights down should put me back in the lobby. I started to descend. My footsteps echoed loudly in the concrete shaft. 1 flight, 2 flights. I reached the door marked 1. I grabbed the handle. Locked. I went down another flight. Ground floor. The door was marked G. I pushed. Locked. Panic began to rise in my chest again. I went down another flight. The door was marked B1. Basement. No, I whispered. I'm not going to the basement. I turned around and started climbing. I passed you. I passed 1. I passed 2. The door I had come through. I kept going. 3, 4. I stopped at the 4th floor landing. The door here was slightly ajar. A sliver of warm, golden light was spilling out onto the cold concrete. I remembered the rules. Rule 6. Room 404 does not exist. But I also remembered Rule 5. Keep the lobby fire burning. If I was stuck in this stairwell for too long, the fire would go out. and whatever lived in the shadows would come for me. I had to get back to an elevator. I pushed the 4th floor door open and stepped into the hallway. It was completely different from the 2nd floor. The carpet here was plush, deep crimson. The walls were paneled in dark oak. The sconces were real crystal, casting fractured rainbows on the walls. It smelled of cigar smoke and expensive perfume. It felt occupied. I walked softly. The numbers on the brass plaques gleamed. 401, 402, 403. I held my breath. The next door should be 405. I took a step. 404. There it was. A door made of black wood, unlike the oak of the others. The number 404 was nailed into the wood with rusted iron spikes. I froze. Walk past it, I told myself. Just walk past it. Don't look at it. I took a step. Click. The handle of room 404 turned. The door creaked open about 6 inches. Darkness poured out of the room. Not just shadow, but a physical darkness, like ink spilling into water. "Excuse me," a voice whispered from the darkness. It wasn't a monster's voice. It was the voice of a kind, elderly man. It sounded frail. "Young man, are you the porter?" I remembered the rule. Do not speak to them for longer than 10 seconds. Yes, sir," I said, keeping my eyes on the carpet. "But I'm afraid I'm on my way to the lobby." "I just need a towel," the old man said. A hand emerged from the darkness. It was pale, wrinkled, and shaking. It held a $5 bill. "Just one clean towel, please. It's so messy in here." I looked at the hand. The fingernails were missing. "I can't, sir," I said, backing away. "I'll send housekeeping in the morning." "Please," the voice cracked. It sounded wetter now. "It won't stop bleeding." The door swung open wider. For a split second, the light from the hallway cut into the room. It wasn't a hotel room. It was a forest. Inside room 404, there were trees. Tall, gray pines growing out of a dirt floor. It was snowing inside, and in the center of the clearing, sitting on a velvet armchair that looked ridiculously out of place in the snow, was a shape covered in a white sheet. The sheet was soaked in red. The hand holding the $5 was attached to an arm that stretched out from under the sheet. It had to be 10 feet long to reach the door. "Get the towel, David," the voice snarled. I screamed. I didn't care about dignity. I turned and ran toward the elevator bank at the end of the hall. The arm shot out of the room. It stretched like rubber, fingers grasping for my ankle. I dove for the elevator button. I slammed my fist against it. Ding! The doors opened immediately. Thank God. I threw myself inside and hit lobby. As the doors closed, I saw the arms slithering down the hallway carpet, dragging the $5 bill, searching for me. The doors shut. I slumped against the mirrored wall, hyperventilating. "Safe," I wheezed. "Safe." The elevator began to descend. Smoothly, quietly. Then it stopped. The lights flickered. The display above the door didn't show a floor number. It showed a symbol. Infinity. The infinity symbol. The elevator wasn't moving anymore, but the feeling of pressure in my ears told me we had gone deep. Deeper than the basement. The speaker crackled. "Going down?" a voice asked. It wasn't the intercom. It was the man standing next to me. I spun around. I hadn't been alone in the elevator. I pressed my back against the elevator doors, trying to put as much distance as possible between me and the other passenger. He was wearing a bellhop's uniform, burgundy jacket, gold buttons, pillbox hat. But the uniform was wrong. The buttons were rusted. The fabric was moth-eaten, and the name tag simply read, "Guest." He was smiling, a wide, thick smile that showed perfectly white, square teeth. "I didn't see you come in," I whispered, my hand groping behind me for the control panel. "I've always been here," he said. His voice was pleasant, like a radio announcer from the 1950s. "Going to the lobby? Or are you going to the party?" Just the lobby, I said, my voice cracking. I glanced down at his hands. They were clasped politely in front of him. He had 6 fingers on his left hand and 7 on his right. The lobby is boring, the bellhop said. He took a step toward me. The elevator was small. He smelled like formaldehyde and old lilies. Funeral flowers. The manager is hosting a ball tonight. Everyone is there. The woman in the red dress. The boy from the vending machine. Even the thing from room 404. He leaned in closer. His eyes were wide, unblinking discs of pale gray. You should come. You have the keys. He pointed to the heavy iron keyring dangling from my belt. I can't. I stammered. I have to work. The fire. I have to tend the fire. The bellhop laughed. It was a dry, rattling sound. The fire went out 20 years ago, David. My stomach dropped. What? Look, he said, gesturing to the floor indicator. The infinity, symbol infinity, was gone. Now it was flashing rapidly. B1, B2, B3, B4. We were descending fast. Too fast. My ears popped painfully. The sensation of gravity increased, pressing me down against the floor. Where are we going? I yelled over the rising whine of the elevator cables. The foundation, the bellhop shouted happily. We're going to see what holds the building up. He started to unbutton his jacket. It gets hot down there, he said. So hot. Underneath the jacket, he wasn't wearing a shirt, and he wasn't wearing skin. His chest was made of black, oily gears. Pistons pumping, clockwork ticking. He wasn't human. He was part of the hotel's machinery. Help me with this zipper, would you? He asked, reaching for his face. He grabbed his own chin and pulled up. The sound of wet tearing filled the small box. No, I screamed. I slammed my fist onto the emergency stop button. Screech. The brakes engaged with a deafening squeal of metal on metal. Sparks showered from the ceiling. The elevator slammed to a halt, throwing us both to the floor. The bellhop, or the machine wearing the bellhop, twitching on the ground. Its face was half peeled off, revealing a rotating brass lens underneath. The doors groaned. They were stuck between floors. I could see concrete at the top and darkness at the bottom. I didn't wait. I scrambled to the gap. It was only about 18 inches high. You can't leave, the bellhop's voice modulated, dropping into a deep, demonic bass. The shift isn't over. A hand, the one with 7 fingers, grabbed my ankle. I kicked. I kicked hard, my heel connecting with the brass lens inside its head. Glass shattered. It shrieked, a sound like a dial-up modem screaming in pain. The grip loosened. I pulled myself through the gap, scraping my chest on the concrete floor of the landing above. I wriggled through, tumbled out, and rolled onto the dusty floor. I scrambled to my feet and looked back. The elevator doors were trying to close, banging against the concrete. Through the gap, I saw the bellhop standing up. The face was gone. The brass lens was broken. It raised a hand and waved. Then, the cables snapped. Snap! The elevator plummeted. I heard it falling. Down, down, down. It took 10 full seconds before I heard the crash. Boom! A cloud of dust puffed up from the shaft. I was alone again. I looked around. I was in a large, open space. It wasn't a hallway. It was a ballroom. The dust from an elevator shaft settled slowly, coating my tongue with the taste of old plaster. I turned away from the black hole in the wall and looked at where I had landed. The space was cavernous. The ceiling soared 50 feet high, painted with a fresco of storm clouds and angels that looked more like vultures. 3 massive crystal chandeliers hung from heavy chains, swaying slightly in a draft I couldn't feel. They weren't lit by bulbs, but by hundreds of actual wax candles, dripping tallow onto the parquet floor below. This was the Grandview ballroom, but it wasn't empty. Hundreds of people were standing in the center of the room. They were frozen in place, paired off as if in the middle of a waltz. They wore clothes from every decade. I saw flapper dresses from the 20s, zoot suits from the 40s, bell-bottoms from the 70s, and modern business suits. It was a museum of fashion, preserved in dust. "Hello," I whispered. No one moved. I took a step forward. The floorboards groaned. At the sound, the band began to play. On a raised stage at the far end of the room, a quartet of musicians, skeletons dressed in tuxedos, lifted their instruments. A cello, 2 violins, and a piano. They didn't play music. They played noise. The bow dragged across the violin strings with a screech like tearing metal. The pianist slammed his bony fingers onto the keys in a discordant, chaotic jumble. It was deafening, and at that signal, the dancers began to move. They didn't waltz. They twitched. Every couple jerked into motion, spinning wildly, out of sync with the noise. Their heads lolled on their necks like broken dolls. I watched in horror as a couple near me spun closer. The man was wearing a tuxedo that was green with mold. The woman wore a wedding dress that was gray with age. As they turned, I saw their faces. They weren't wearing masks. Their mouths were sewn shut with thick black thread. Their eyes were missing, just empty black sockets weeping dark fluid. They were dead. All of them. The guests of the hotel. The ones who never checked out. "Join us," a voice whispered in my ear. I spun around. Standing right behind me was Mr. Sterling, the manager. He was holding a silver tray with 2 glasses of champagne. The bubbles in the glasses weren't moving. "Mr. Sterling," I gasped. I quit. I want to leave." "You can't quit in the middle of a shift, David," Sterling said, his voice cutting through the cacophony of the skeletal band. "Look at them. They are happy. They have nowhere else to be. No rent, no debt, just the dance." He held out a glass. "Drink," he commanded. "It will make the music sound beautiful." I looked at the glass. The liquid inside was thick, red. I looked at the dancers. They were closing in. The circle was tightening around me. Hundreds of sewn-shut mouths. Hundreds of empty sockets. "No," I said. I slapped the tray out of his hand. The glasses shattered. The red liquid splattered onto the floor. The music stopped instantly. Every single dancer froze. Every head snapped toward me. Sterling looked down at the spilled wine. His face didn't show anger. It showed hunger. "That," he whispered, "was a violation of Rule 8. Never refuse the manager's hospitality." He opened his mouth. It kept opening. His jaw unhinged, dropping down to his chest. His throat wasn't a throat. It was a staircase. A tiny, spiral staircase leading down into his gullet. And from deep inside him, something started to climb up. I didn't wait to see what it was. I saw a set of double doors behind the stage, marked kitchen. I shoved a pair of rotting dancers out of my way. They felt like dry leaves crumbling under my hands, and sprinted for the doors. The scream that erupted behind me wasn't human. It was the sound of a building tearing itself apart. I burst through the kitchen doors and slammed the deadbolt. I was in the dark again. I leaned against the kitchen doors, listening. On the other side, the ballroom was chaos. The discordant music had resumed, louder now, joined by the rhythmic thud-thud-thud of hundreds of bodies throwing themselves against the wood. "Let us in," they moaned in unison. It sounded like the wind howling through a tunnel. "The dance isn't over." I backed away. The kitchen was cold. Stainless steel counters gleamed under the pale blue light of a bug zapper that buzzed intermittently. The air smelled of rotten meat and bleach. I needed a weapon. A knife. A cleaver. Anything. I searched the drawers. Empty. I checked the walk-in freezer. The handle was padlocked. "Great," I whispered. "Just great." I hurried toward the back of the kitchen, looking for an exit. I found a narrow door, marked janitorial. I pushed it open. It was a small closet, barely big enough for a slop sink and a shelf of chemicals. But it wasn't empty. Curled up in the corner, amidst a pile of dirty rags, was a skeleton. It was wearing a uniform, not a bellhop uniform, a night porter's uniform. The name tag, covered in dust, read, Thomas. Thomas, I breathed. The guy before me. In his bony lap sat a notebook, a standard, spiral-bound college notebook. I picked it up. The pages were yellowed and brittle. I opened it. The handwriting was frantic, scrawled in pencil. October 14th, 1998. I found out what the hotel is. It's not a building. It's a stomach. It digests us slowly. The rules aren't there to keep us safe. They're there to season the meat. Fear makes us taste better. I flipped a few pages. November 2nd. I found a way out. Not the front door. The front door is a loop. If you walk out, you just walk back in through the back door. The only way out is up. The roof. There is a maintenance ladder on the 13th floor that leads to the roof access. The sky is real up there. I think. November 3rd. They know I know. Sterling is watching me. The eyes in the paintings are following me. I'm going to try for the 13th floor tonight. If you find this, don't go to the basement. Go up. The entry stopped there. I looked at Thomas. He had never made it to the 13th floor. His leg was shattered, the bone twisted at an unnatural angle. He had crawled in here to hide and died in the dark. Go up, I whispered. I looked at the ceiling. Above the drop tiles, I could hear the pipes groaning. The 13th floor. Most hotels don't have a 13th floor. They skip from 12 to 14 because of superstition. But the Grandview wasn't superstitious. It was the source of the superstition. If Thomas was right, the 13th floor was the only place the rules didn't apply. Or maybe it was the place where all the rules came from. I tucked the notebook into my pocket. Thanks, Thomas, I said to the skeleton. I reached for the door handle to leave the closet. Click. The lock engaged from the outside. I froze. David, a voice called from the kitchen. It was soft, childlike. Are you in the closet? I want to show you my drawing. I looked at the gap under the door. Two shadows were standing there, but the shadows didn't match feet. They looked like hooves. David, the voice giggled. Open the door, or I'll huff, and I'll puff. The door rattled violently. I looked around the tiny closet. No windows, no vents, just the sink, the chemicals, and the ceiling tiles. I climbed onto the edge of the sink. I pushed up on a tile. It lifted easily. I pulled myself up into the crawl space just as the door handle snapped off. I replaced the tile beneath me and lay flat in the dusty darkness of the ceiling void. Below me, the door crashed open. Found you, the voice shrieked. But the closet was empty. I held my breath, listening to the creature sniff the air. He went up. It hissed. He went into the walls. I started to crawl. I had to find a service shaft. I had to get to the 13th floor. The crawl space was a labyrinth of ductwork and cloth-wrapped wires. It was tight, barely enough room to shimmy on my elbows. The air up here was hot and smelled of burnt hair. I crawled for what felt like miles. Below me, through the gaps in the tiles, I could see flashes of the hotel. I crawled over a hallway where the carpet was writhing like a pit of snakes. I crawled over a room where a man was arguing with a mirror, and the reflection was strangling him. I crawled over the lobby. I stopped. Through a vent grate, I looked down at the front desk. The fire was out. The massive fireplace was dark, cold, and because the fire was out, the shadows had detached themselves from the walls. They weren't just absences of light anymore. They were three-dimensional forms, standing in the center of the lobby. Tall, faceless silhouettes made of static and void. They were drifting toward the front doors. Bang! Something hit the hotel from the outside. The massive front door shook. Bang! The shadows inside recoiled. They're trying to get in, I realized. Sterling had said, "Lock for your protection." I thought he meant to key me in, but he meant to keep something else out. The hotel was a cage for the monsters inside, yes, but it was also a fortress against something much worse outside. And now the fire was out. The barrier was down. Crack! One of the thick glass windows in the lobby shattered. Fog poured in, but it wasn't just fog. It was living smoke. It swirled into the lobby, and where it touched the velvet furniture, the fabric aged 100 years in a second, crumbling to dust. The shadows in the lobby screamed, a high-pitched frequency that made my teeth ache, and attacked the fog. It was a war between the ghosts of the hotel and the ancient things from the forest. And I was trapped in the ceiling right above the battlefield. Suddenly, the ductwork beneath me gave a groan. Creak! The metal bolts were rusting before my eyes, exposed to the corrupting fog drifting up from the lobby. No, 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 I whispered. I scrambled forward, trying to reach a solid beam. Snap! The vent gave way. I fell. I plummeted 10 feet and landed hard on top of a vending machine on the second-floor mezzanine. The metal box crumpled under my weight, breaking my fall but knocking the wind out of me. I rolled off the machine and hit the floor, gasping. I looked over the railing of the mezzanine. The lobby below was a slaughterhouse of physics. Gravity was fluctuating. Furniture was floating in the air. The shadows were tearing the fog entities apart, and the fog was dissolving the shadows into nothingness. I had to move. I had to get to the 13th floor. I looked down the hallway. The elevator shaft was still broken, the doors hanging open to the empty pit. But next to it was the service elevator, the freight lift. I sprinted toward it. The floor beneath me was shaking as the building groaned under the assault. I reached the freight elevator and slammed the button. Nothing happened. No power. Come on, I yelled, hitting it again. Then I saw the manual override lever next to the doors. It was rusted shut. I grabbed it with both hands. I pulled. I gritted my teeth. Clang. The lever moved. The heavy steel doors shuddered and groaned open about 2 feet. I squeezed through. The car was there. It was a simple metal cage. I looked at the control panel. It had buttons for every floor. G1, 2, 3, 12. And above 12. Nothing. Just a keyhole. Of course, I spat. It needs a key. I patted my belt. The heavy iron keyring Sterling had given me. I fumbled with the keys. There were dozens of them. Skeleton keys, brass keys, modern keys. I found one that looked different. It was made of bone. I jammed it into the keyhole. It fit. I turned it. The elevator lurched. It didn't go up immediately. It shuddered, as if the building was refusing to let it go. Then, slowly, agonizingly, it began to rise. Through the cage mesh, I watched the floors pass. 3rd floor, the walls were bleeding. 4th floor, the forest had overgrown the hallway. 7th floor, the woman in the red dress was standing right in front of the elevator cage, watching me pass. She smiled and waved. 10, 11, 12. The elevator didn't stop. It kept going. It passed the 12th floor. The air in the shaft changed. It stopped smelling like rot and ozone. It started to smell like nothing. Pure, sterile vacuum. The elevator stopped. The doors didn't open automatically. I pushed them open. I stepped out onto the 13th floor. There was no carpet on the 13th floor. There was no wallpaper. There were no sconces. There was only white. I stepped out of the elevator cage into a hallway that looked like it hadn't finished rendering. The walls were smooth, stark white polygons. The floor was a grid of gray lines on a white background. It was silent here. The chaos of the lobby, the screams of the breach, it was all gone. Hello, I called out. My voice didn't echo. The sound just died the moment it left my lips. I walked down the grid. There were no doors, just an endless white corridor that seemed to curve gently to the left. I walked for minutes, or hours. Time felt different here. It felt thick, like wading through syrup. Then, I saw something breaking the whiteness. A desk. It wasn't the mahogany desk from the lobby. It was a simple metal office desk from the 1980s. Sitting behind it was a mannequin. It had no face, just a smooth, plastic head. It was wearing a gray suit. On the desk was a single red telephone. I approached slowly. "Is this management?" I asked the mannequin. The telephone rang. Ring. I picked it up. "Hello. You're not supposed to be here, David," Sterling's voice said. But it didn't sound like it was coming through the phone. It sounded like it was coming from inside my own head. "I found the key," I said. "I found the loophole. This is the 13th floor. The rules don't apply here. The rules are made here," Sterling corrected. "This is the architect's floor. You are standing in the blueprint." The mannequin's head turned. It didn't have eyes, but I felt it looking at me. "I want to leave," I said. "Thomas said there's a ladder to the roof." "Thomas was a fool," Sterling sighed. "He thought the roof was outside. The roof is just the lid of the jar, David. But if you want to see, go ahead." The mannequin raised a stiff plastic arm and pointed down the corridor. At the end of the white hall, a section of the wall flickered and disappeared, revealing a rusted iron ladder bolted to the nothingness. I dropped the phone. It didn't hit the desk. It dissolved into pixels before it landed. I ran toward the ladder. I grabbed the cold iron rungs. I climbed. Up into the white void. I climbed until my arms burned. Finally, I reached a hatch. I spun the wheel. It groaned, rusted tight. I put my shoulder into it and shoved. Clang. The hatch flew open. Fresh air hit my face. Real air. Cold, smelling of rain and pine needles. I scrambled up and rolled onto the surface. I was on the roof. I stood up and looked around, laughing with relief. I was out. I was under the night sky. I could see the moon. I could see the stars. I walked to the edge of the roof to look down on the ground to find my car. I looked over the edge. My laughter died in my throat. There was no ground. The hotel didn't sit on the earth. It floated in an endless, gray abyss. Below me, there were just clouds, thick, roiling storm clouds that stretched down forever. And above me, I looked up at the moon again. It wasn't a moon. It was a giant, unblinking eye. And the stars weren't stars. They were holes in a black cardboard sky, letting light through from a massive laboratory ceiling far, far above. We were in a box, a specimen jar on a shelf. "Oh God," I whispered. Behind me, the hatch slammed shut. I spun around. Standing on the roof, blocking the only way down, was Mr. Sterling. But he wasn't human anymore. His skin was cracking like porcelain. Light was leaking out of the cracks. "I told you, David," he said, his voice booming like thunder. "The shift never ends." Sterling stepped toward me. With every step, a piece of his human disguise fell away. A chunk of cheek flaked off like dried plaster, revealing not muscle or bone, but a blinding, geometric light underneath. His suit rippled and dissolved into smoke. "You see now," the voice vibrated. "It wasn't just sound, it was pressure. The Grandview is not a place. It is a containment unit. And you are the immune system." I backed away until my heels were on the very edge of the roof. The wind from the abyss whipped at my clothes. "Immune system?" I shouted. "I'm a janitor. I'm a kid with student debt." "Exactly," the entity that was once Sterling said. It was now a towering figure of pure light, vaguely shaped like a man but too tall, too angular. "Desperation makes you attentive. Fear keeps you alert. We need a human observer. The rules, they only work if a human believes in them." He Or it gestured to the giant eye in the sky. That it pointed to the moon eye is the auditor. It watches to make sure the containment holds. As long as you follow the rules, as long as you keep the fire burning, the things inside the hotel stay inside. You keep the nightmare small, David. You keep it locked in a box so the rest of the world can sleep. I don't care about the world. I screamed. I want to go home. Home. The light being laughed. It sounded like glass breaking. You have seen the 13th floor. You have seen the edge of the world. If you go back to your home, you will see the cracks in reality everywhere. You will see the eyes in the wallpaper. You will hear the breathing in the walls. You can never go back, David. You are infected with the truth. He reached out a hand. It was a hand made of starlight. The breach downstairs is widening, it said. The fog is getting in. The previous porter, Thomas, failed. He tried to escape, and the fire went out. Now the walls are weak. We need a new manager. I froze. Manager. I am tired, David, the entity sighed. The light dimmed slightly. I have held the keys for 1,000 years. My shift is over. I need a relief. He held out the iron keyring. Take them, he commanded. Become the building. Become the rules. You will have power. You will have eternity. You will never have to worry about rent or hunger or death again. I looked at the keys. They glinted in the light of the giant eye. And if I refuse, then I throw you off this roof. It said simply, and you fall forever in the gray void. And the hotel falls, and everything inside it, the dancers, the forest room, the things in the basement, spills out into the real world. Your family, your friends, they will all meet the guests. I looked down at the abyss. I looked at the keys. I thought about my life before this. The unpaid bills, the lonely apartment, the feeling of being invisible. I looked at the power radiating off Sterling. If I take the job, I asked, my voice trembling, do I get to make my own rules? The light being paused. Yes, it said. The manager makes the rules. I took a step forward. I reached for the keys, but I didn't take them. Instead, I grabbed Sterling's wrist, or the beam of light where his wrist should be. It burned. It felt like grabbing a live wire. Rule number 13, I snarled, making it up on the spot. The manager never leaves until the replacement is trained. I pulled. I didn't pull him toward me. I threw my weight backward toward the edge. Sterling let out a roar of surprise. We tumbled over the edge of the roof. Together, we fell. The wind roared in my ears, tearing at my clothes. Sterling, the entity of light, writhed in my grip, burning my hands, but I didn't let go. If I was going down, I was taking the rulemaker with me. We plummeted past the 13th floor windows, just white light. Past the 7th floor, I saw the woman in the red dress pressing her face against the glass, screaming silently. Past the lobby, and then we hit the fog. We didn't hit the ground. We hit the gray, swirling mist that surrounded the hotel's floating island. It wasn't like hitting water. It was like hitting a memory. The moment we touched the mist, the world shattered. Flash. I was sitting in my Honda Civic. It was night. My hands were on the steering wheel. I could smell stale coffee and upholstery cleaner. I blinked. My heart was racing, pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I looked down at my hands. They were unburned. My watch read 10:58 p.m. I looked out the windshield. I was parked on a gravel driveway. Ahead of me, looming out of the mist like a cliff face, was the Grandview Hotel. No, I whispered. I grabbed the door handle and threw it open. I scrambled out onto the gravel. No, I screamed at the building. The hotel sat there, silent and dark, except for the golden glow of the lobby windows. I turned to run back to my car. My car was gone. In its place was a rust-covered wreck. A Honda Civic that looked like it had been sitting in the forest for 50 years. The tires were rotted away. Vines were growing through the shattered windshield. And inside the car, sitting in the driver's seat, was a skeleton. It was wearing my clothes. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. "You're late, David." The voice came from behind me. I spun around. Standing by the hotel entrance was Mr. Sterling. He looked human again. Perfect suit, pale skin, but his eyes were different. One was blue, the other was a cracked, glowing white light. He held up the iron keyring. "You tried to resign," he said, smiling a thin, cruel smile. "But per Clause 7C, you cannot leave the premises until the shift concludes." "I killed you," I gasped. "I threw us off the roof." "You threw us into the loop," Sterling corrected. "The hotel exists outside of time. Falling just resets the clock. But there's a penalty for attempted desertion." He tossed the keys. They landed in the gravel at my feet with a heavy clink. "Pick them up," he ordered. "No," I said. "Pick them up, or I'll let the fog in. Not the lobby this time. I'll let it into your mind." He snapped his fingers. The trees around us groaned. The shadows between the trunks began to move. They weren't just shadows. They were the memories I had tried to forget. My failures, my debts, my loneliness. They took shape, clawing at the edges of my vision. I looked at the rotting car, my own skeleton. I looked at the keys. If I didn't take them, I would die out here in the dark, eaten by my own past. If I took them, I went back to work. I knelt down. The gravel bit into my knees. I reached out and grabbed the cold iron ring. "Good," Sterling whispered. "Shift starts now." He turned and walked into the hotel. I stood up. I walked to the revolving doors. I pushed. I was back in the lobby, but it was different this time. The fire was roaring. The desk was polished, but on the wall, where the clock used to be, there was a mirror, and when I looked in it, I didn't see David. I saw a man in a suit, pale skin, sunken eyes. I looked down at my name tag. It didn't say David. It said, "Manager." I stared at the reflection. The man in the mirror straightened his tie. I felt my own hands move to do the same, though I hadn't told them to. "So that's how it works?" I whispered. My voice sounded deeper, smoother, like oil pouring over gravel. I walked behind the heavy mahogany desk. It felt right. It felt like I had been standing there for centuries. I looked at the logbook. It was open to a fresh page. The ink was still wet. To the new night porter, I wrote. My handwriting was elegant, archaic. "If you're reading this, I am already watching you." The front doors revolved. A young woman walked in. She looked tired. Her clothes were cheap. She had the smell of desperation about her, stale fast food and unpaid loans. She walked up to the desk, looking around nervously at the empty lobby. "Hello," she called out. "I'm here for the interview." The ad said $50 an hour. I smiled. I didn't blink. "You're late," I said. She jumped. "I'm sorry. The GPS got confused." "I know who you are, Sarah," I said. I pulled a contract from under the desk. The paper was crisp. "I'm the manager. We have been waiting for you." I slid the paper across the marble. "Sign here," I said softly, "and welcome to the family." She picked up the pen. I looked past her, toward the elevators. The doors opened. The bellhop waved at me with his seven-fingered hand. The woman in the red dress was standing on the mezzanine, watching. They were my staff now. Sarah signed her name. "Excellent," I said. I handed her the keys. "Do not let the fire go out, Sarah." I stepped out from behind the desk. I walked toward the elevator. "Where are you going?" she asked. I pressed the button. "To the 13th floor," I said. "I have some new rules to write." The doors closed. The shift never ends. But at least now, I'm the one holding the whip. And that is where we end our shift for tonight. The Grandview is always open, waiting for its next employee. The question is, Would you have taken the keys? Or would you have joined the dancers in the ballroom? If this story kept you awake, make sure to hit that like button. It helps us keep the fire burning in the lobby. And if you want to be notified when the next nightmare begins, subscribe to Midnight Confessions and turn on the dark. Tell me in the comments below, what is the weirdest rule you've ever had at a job? I read every single one. Until next time, stay out of the shadows